Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an incredible day. If you're new here, welcome. It's nice to meet ya. I don't know if you can tell by the lighting, but it is very gloomy and stormy and rainy here in Brisbane, so it's just the perfect mood to sit down, get cozy, and talk about another Mystery Monday case together. Quickly before we get into it, I just want to thank today's sponsor Skillshare for making this video possible. If you guys don't know what Skillshare is, it's an online learning platform that has thousands of classes, so there is something for everybody, every skill level too, whether you want to pick up or learn a new skill or hobby, or if there's something that you're already experienced in or interested in that you just want to learn more about. It's curated specifically for learning, so there are no pesky ads. Speaking of, they also have live classes as well, which I think is a really cool feature, so you can learn with real teachers and other members in real time. Personally, I've been really into the portrait photography class by Jessica Gobasi at the moment. I have been doing social media for 6 years now, and I still am so incredibly clueless and awkward when it comes to taking photos, posing, finding good lighting, finding a good background. I would actually get into bad moods when I had to go and take photos because I just found it so difficult to get a good one and get everything right. It's been really interesting. I would definitely recommend it if you're into photography or taking photos of any kind. And if you guys are interested in checking Skillshare out, the first 1,000 of you guys to click the link in my description will get a 1-month free trial to Skillshare to check out any of their classes. So definitely make sure you check that out. I'll leave all of the information down below in the description, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Burger Chef murders. On the 17th of November in 1978, there were 4 employees working at the Speedway Burger Chef in Indianapolis. And if you don't know what Burger Chef is, it was basically this huge fast food chain in the US, and it had over 1,000 restaurants at its peak, but they're not around anymore. They were purchased by Hardee's in the late 80s, and then the last Burger Chef restaurant closed in the 90s. Also in the late 1970s, a lot of crazy things were happening in Speedway, and up until this point, it was considered to be this peaceful and safe place. But then on the 29th of July in 1978, 65-year-old Julia Cyphers was shot to death inside her garage. And then between the 1st and the 6th of September, a series of 8 bombings occurred. Bombs were placed in police patrol cars, in the bowling alley, just on the street, in the shopping centers. And the last bombing that occurred was on the 6th of September. The bomb was placed in a gym bag in the car parking lot of the Speedway High School, and 2 people were severely injured. A Vietnam veteran's leg was blown off, and an artery in his wife's leg was severed. And then in late November of that same year, the Burger Chef murders occurred. So 1978 was a really crazy time for Speedway. So as I said, on the evening of Friday the 17th of November in 1978, there were 4 employees on the closing shift at the Speedway Burger Chef. Jane Freed was the oldest at 20, and she was the assistant manager on that night. She had been working at Burger Chef since she was a 17-year-old student, and she originally worked at another Burger Chef location before being transferred to the Speedway store in 1978, and she was actually promoted to assistant manager just 3 months after transferring to the Speedway Burger Chef for good reason. She was a really hard worker. She took her job very seriously. She was working 52 hours a week and did pretty much everything at the store. She hired new employees, she trained them, she took inventory, she handled the money and a ton more stuff, and she was also in line to be promoted to store manager. She was also super hardworking at college as well. She was involved in her school's yearbook staff, concert band, choir, pep club, drama, gymnastics. She served as a teacher's aide and library assistant. Like, she was really doing it all. And on top of all of that, she was also a really nice person. Like, friends and family referred to her as Sweet Jane because she was this really happy, inviting, positive person with a beautiful smile who was always laughing. Also working that night was 17-year-old Ruth Shelton. She was an honor student at Northwest High School and was pursuing a double major in business and maths, and was hoping to go to college to pursue a degree in computer science. She was described as quiet, intelligent, hardworking, and creative. She loved to macrame. She participated in several youth ministries at the Westside Church of the Nazarene, and she also studied music at what is now the University of Indianapolis to earn some extra college credits. Absolute girl bosses, both of them, might I add. 16-year-old Mark Flemons was on the grill that night. He was the youngest of Robert and Blondell Flemons' 7 children, and he was raised in a devout Jehovah's his witness household. He was described as a friendly guy who took pride in his appearance. He dressed well. He was very schmick, you know? He was a student at Speedway High School, and he struggled a little bit in his freshman year, but he was working really hard to do better as a sophomore. And so because he was doing better, his parents allowed him to get a job at the Speedway Burger Chef because it was close enough to home to walk to and from. And he actually wasn't even meant to be working this night, but his co-worker had asked him to swap shifts and he agreed. And this had me down a whole rabbit hole of just thinking about the fact that there are these so many small or seemingly small decisions that we make in life that could have a massive effect on the entire trajectory of our lives. I was like having a whole existential crisis thinking about it. And the last person working that night was 16-year-old Daniel Davis. He was a junior at Decatur High School, and he was known to be a bit of a jokester. He loved to laugh. He loved to make people laugh. He also had a passion for photography and developed his pictures at home in his own darkroom, which I just think is so groovy. And he was also fascinated with aviation and planned to enlist in the US Air Force after high school. He was a model employee, and he was actually pretty new to the Friday night shift, having just started a week earlier when one of the other employees left her position. So they close the store up at 11 p.m. and they're just packing up for the night. You know, they have to close the registers, count the cash, clean the kitchen and the floors and take the rubbish out, just kind of all of that stuff, getting the place ready for the next morning. Sometime just after midnight, 17-year-old Brian Kring was on his way home, and he decided to pop in, pay them a visit, see if they needed a hand or anything. He was also an employee at the Speedway Burger Chef, but he obviously wasn't on that night, but he was friends with the employees, so he decided to just, you know, see if they needed a hand, pay them a visit, say hey, which, can I just say, what a nice fella. Because when I worked at Kmart or any of the casual jobs I had when I was younger, you just would not catch me going in there on my night off to help them clean up or pack up. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. Anyway, he gets there after midnight and the parking lot's empty. Jane's 1974 Chevy Vega was nowhere to be seen, but the lights were on inside the restaurant, so he assumed that they were all in there cleaning up the store. Knowing the front doors would be locked, he went straight round to the back and noticed that the back door was slightly ajar, which immediately sketchy. He goes inside and it's eerily quiet. No one's there. He calls out for them. Nobody responds. When he walks through the front counters, he sees that the cash register drawers are lying on the floor empty. So he goes into the manager's office and the safe is open, there's money missing, other little bits and bobs that are meant to be in there are missing, but Ruth and Jane's jackets are crumpled up on the floor, their purses are still there, so everything's obviously looking really sketchy. I mean, the purses are still there, but Jane's car's gone, the lights are left on, the back door is ajar, and mind you, that back door is always locked unless one of the employees is taking rubbish out the back. So he was worried that one of the employees had started taking the rubbish out, left the door ajar while they just went in to grab some more rubbish, and an opportunist saw this, barged their way in, and abducted the four of them. He starts calling around to try and track them down. He calls the old burger chef that Jane used to work at, and the manager there says that he hasn't seen or heard from her. He then calls Robert Gilliard, who is the manager of the Speedway Burger Chef, who prompts him to call 911, so he does. Speedway police arrive pretty quickly. They have a look around the place, and they notice next to the open safe that there's 2 empty currency bags and an empty roll of adhesive tape. Robert Gilliard, the manager, also came to the Speedway Burger Chef, and he started tallying all the receipts, trying to figure out how much money was missing, and he found that $581 in cash was missing from the safe. Interestingly though, the safe still contained $100 worth of rolled coins, and Ruth and Jane's purses were still there. They hadn't been taken. Now at first, surprise, surprise, police didn't really take the whole thing seriously. They thought that the 4 employees had just taken the cash themselves and had gone out partying for a night out the town. Even though Jane and Ruth's jackets and purses were both still there, they were like, oh, you know, just careless teenagers. They obviously just whoopsie left it there. The manager, Robert, did not buy a bar of this. He told the police, he was like, they are exceptional, hardworking, responsible. It would just be so far out of character for them to do this, but police were like, no. We're definitely right about this one. They didn't close the shop off as a crime scene. They didn't take any fingerprints. They didn't take any photos. They didn't take any evidence. And then the next morning, a new shift of employees came in and they scrubbed the place top to bottom in their morning opening duties and removed any potential evidence that could be there. So the investigation was not off to the best start, to say the least, but police did call the parents of the 4 employees and they also set out to find them. Reserve and off-duty officers from the Marion Sheriff's Department Department joined the search, and they also used helicopters to search from above. The Indiana State Police issued an alert for the 4 employees, and the FBI also offered to help in any way that they could. Just a few hours later, at 4:30 a.m. on the 18th of November, Jane's Chevy Vega was found less than 2 blocks from the Speedway Police headquarters. The driver's side door was locked, but the rest of the car was unlocked and the keys were nowhere to be found. The car was searched and dusted for fingerprints, but no new leads came of the discovery. The discovery of the car did, however, make police change their tune because they just didn't think that she would voluntarily abandon her car. They started to believe that foul play might be involved, and this might be a case of a robbery gone wrong. So police realized their mistake of not treating the Burger Chef restaurant like a crime scene, not taking photos, not taking fingerprints, doing literally nothing. So later that day, they decided to go back there and try and reconstruct the scene from memory. It was obviously too late, and I don't know what that would have accomplished anyway because it had been scrubbed top to bottom and all of the evidence was gone. So I'm not sure what the thought process was there. Too little too late, boys. The next day, on the afternoon of Sunday the 19th of November, police received a call from Fred Heger. He owned a heavily wooded property at Stones Crossing Road in rural Johnson County, which is about 20 miles or 30 kilometers away from Speedway. He and his wife Rosemary went on a little walk at around 3:15 p.m. when they stumbled upon 4 bodies, and he immediately recognized the Burger Chef uniforms that they were clothed in and contacted police, and police arrived on the scene within minutes. The bodies were found in a small glen at the center of the woods. Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton were found lying side by side, face down in the dirt. They both had been executed and had multiple .38 caliber gunshot wounds to their heads, neck, and shoulders. Mark Flemons and Jane Freed were found several meters away in opposite directions, so the 4 bodies were found in kind of like a triangular shape. Investigators believe that originally all 4 of the kids were lying side by side, and then when the first shots were fired at Ruth and Daniel, that Jane and Mark ran in opposite directions trying to flee. Jane was caught relatively quickly, and she was stabbed so brutally in the heart that the blade of the knife broke inside her chest, and she was found with the blade from a 5-inch hunting knife still protruding from her sternum. Mark's death was definitely the most confusing. He had sustained a blow to the head, and his autopsy revealed that he had some internal injuries, but he actually died from asphyxiating on his own blood, and it took him anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes to choke to death. It couldn't be determined, however, what exactly caused his death. It was theorized that he was either beaten by a chain-like instrument and he was just left there to choke on his own blood, or that when he was running and fleeing from his attackers, he just ran really hard and really fast into a tree, which is what caused his injuries. The worst part of it is that the way that he was lying is what caused his blood to drain into his lungs, which caused him to asphyxiate. But if he had landed in any other position, he would have just passed out for a little while and then eventually regained consciousness and lived. There were no obvious signs of a struggle on any of their uniforms, and while it was almost impossible to determine the time of death, the coroner believed that they weren't held hostage for any period of time and that they were murdered almost immediately upon arriving at the woods. They were also found with money and watches and jewelry on them, which led police to believe that this may be a little bit more than just a robbery gone wrong. Police did search the area for clues, but there was very little evidence to go on. Really, the only thing they found was a tire track on the driveway, and they made a plaster mold of that in the hopes that they could eventually identify a make and model of the car. They also questioned Fred and Rosemary, but they hadn't seen or heard anything, and they had no idea how the bodies could have ended up there. To be honest, the police kind of fumbled this case. A retired officer actually later came out and said that this investigation could literally be used as an example of what not to do. Basically, there was just like a bunch of different departments that were all trying to be involved. You know, the kids went missing in Speedway, but their bodies were found in Johnson County, so both of those departments wanted to be involved. Fred Hager had called the Indiana State Police Department, so they were also involved. They all kind of got into this like turf war over the case and who was doing what, and things got really muddled because there were so many people and so many different departments trying to be involved. Some officers were driving through areas that should have been closed off. There were reports that one of the victims' bodies was actually moved before the coroner or the evidence technician even arrived on scene. And one detective actually took 2 pieces of ID from one of the victims, put them in his pocket, took them home, and didn't even realize until a few weeks later. So not only had the scene at the Burger Chef restaurant been fumbled, but now the scene where the bodies had discovered had also been fumbled, and it just wasn't good. But all of these different departments are working on the case, and the Indiana State Police gave the case the highest priority, and the leading theory at the time was that this was a botched robbery. They theorized that between 11:15 p.m. on the 17th and 12:15 a.m. on the 18th, that one of the boys had been taking out the rubbish, and they left the door slightly ajar while they went back in to get the rest of the rubbish to take out, and somebody walking by, or maybe somebody who was waiting outside, saw the opportunity to break in without a struggle. As I mentioned earlier, Mark Flemons wasn't meant to be working that night because he'd swapped shifts with another employee, so they theorized that the perpetrators were surprised when they saw him there, that Mark recognized him, and so they decided to kill all 4 of the workers to eliminate any witnesses. As the investigation goes on, police receive a few calls from different witnesses. They spoke to a man named Michael Grider who said that he was stopped at a light on 16th Street and Lyndhurst Street, which was like 2 minutes from the Burger Chef restaurant, and he saw a bearded man in a small car with all of the windows fogged up. After hearing about the murders, he contacted police right away and told them about what he'd seen, and police got him in for questioning. They also got a hypnotist in to try and get any more information out of it, but they didn't get any more information from that, and they never found out if his information was actually related to the case or not. Residents on Lupine Drive, which is about 5 minutes from the Burger Chef restaurant, said that they saw both a car and a 2-tone van speeding through the neighborhood without their lights on, and one of the residents said that she heard a scream as the vehicle passed and that the car appeared to be full of kids. And lastly, they received a call from the 16-year-old guy who had gone to pick up his girlfriend and walk her home from her shift at Dunkin' Donuts, which was right next door to the Burger Chef. He told police that sometime between 11:15 and 11:30 p.m. that he and his girlfriend were sitting by the railroad tracks when they were approached by 2 men. These men were both white, they were in their early to mid-30s, and they were dressed in shabby clothes. One of the men had dark hair and a full beard and mustache, and he would hold a handkerchief up to his mouth as he spoke. And the other man was clean-shaven and had lighter hair. The guy with the beard and the mustache asked them what their names were, what they were doing there, and the teen told them that they were just talking, and the bearded man told them that they should leave because there was like a lot of vandalism in the area. So the guy and his girlfriend decided to leave, and they cut through the Burger Chef parking lot, and they passed a white Chevy Vega as they did, which of course would have been Jane's car. They didn't think a ton about it at the time, but after hearing about the murders, they called police, and police got them in for an interview, even got a hypnotist in again to try and get any more information that they could. And based on this information, police got a composite sketch drawn up, and then they also commissioned a forensic artist to carve full-size clay busts of the suspects. They hoped that it would help jog someone's memory, or that somebody would recognize them and come forward. And the Speedway police received like 500 to 600 phone calls in the week following the clay bust being released. And they followed up all of these leads. A man who resembled one of these clay busts was overheard talking about committing the murders at a bar in Greenwood, and so someone contacted the police, a detective went undercover, and even played a game of pool with the suspect. While they played, this man bragged about robbing and killing the Burger Chef victims, and even broke his pool cue over his knee. He was arrested shortly after, but once in custody, he quickly changed his tune and pretty much denied everything. Before being let go though, this guy did give police the name of a few men who were involved in this fast food robbery gang, and so police went and tracked down one of these men in Franklin. He looked like the bearded man in the sketches in clay busts, and he didn't have an alibi for the night of the murders, and he also had a neighbor who looked just like the sketch of the clean-shaven accomplice. So police asked him to come in for a lineup, but when he came in for this lineup, he had conveniently shaved his beard and mustache for the first time in 5 years. So obviously he wasn't picked out of a lineup. Police had no other evidence on him, nothing else to go of, and so he was released. Earlier in the year, on the 16th of July, 6 employees from the Sirloin Stockade were found shot to death in the refrigeration unit of the restaurant, and 4 of these victims were under the age of 18. Police worked with Oklahoma detectives to try and see if there was any connection between these 2 cases, but they came up empty-handed. They also looked into a bunch of different fast food store robberies, but found no connections. Eventually, they set up a special hotline for people to call in with tips and leads, and they checked out every single one no matter how far-fetched, but didn't receive any leads of value. Burger Chef posted a $25,000 reward for any information that led to an arrest, and this was up to $35,000 when an anonymous person added another $10,000 to the reward. And then eventually Steak and Shake also added another few $1,000s to this reward. But unfortunately, nothing came of this. On the 29th of November, the Indianapolis Star received a letter which claimed that 3 people were involved in the murders and that it did start out as a robbery, just like police suspected. It didn't explain why the robbers decided to kill the 4 employees, but it did state that 2 of the people involved were involved in the murder and that the 3rd person was a bystander who stayed in the car while the murders took place. And apparently this 3rd person was really shocked when the incident resulted in murder, and that if they reached out to this 3rd person and gave them immunity, that they would likely give up and confess. They also stated though that these 3 people had broken up and that none of them were in Indiana anymore. Police made several public appeals for the author of this letter to come forward, and then 2 weeks later they received a follow-up letter. It read, "I don't think I'll be able to help anymore, but you gotta believe that the 3rd person didn't know what was gonna happen to the 4 kids when they arrived in the woods. They was gonna just tie them up and leave. Supposedly there was nothing said about killing them. The 3rd person tried to stop them, and supposedly after the 1st child was shot, the 3rd person yelled run and got beat up for it. I wish the one that ran into the tree didn't died. That way maybe you policemen would have these killers locked up by now. I'm sorry I can't help any more than this, but I can't break a promise." After this, police made several public appeals for the author and the 3rd person to come forward, and even offered this 3rd person immunity, but nobody ever came forward. By the 5th of December, the special hotline that was set up was turned off between 12 a.m. and 8 a.m, and slowly officers were reassigned back to their regular duties. And then 6 years later, in December of 1984, an inmate from the Pendleton Correctional Facility contacted a reporter from the Indianapolis Star and said that they believed a man named Donald Ray Forrester was responsible for the Burger Chef murders. Forrester was born on the 6th of September in 1951 in New Whiteland, and he grew up near where the victims of the Burger Chef murders' bodies were actually found. From the age of 18, he was already in trouble with the law. He was arrested for disorderly conduct and public intoxication and reckless driving. And by the 15th of July in 1969, he was arrested for assault and battery with the intent to gratify sexual desires. In 1977, he was serving a 1 to 10 year sentence for sodomy, and he and another inmate got in trouble for holding the prison counselor hostage at knife point. For some reason, he was released shortly after this, and during 1978, when the Burger Chef murders occurred, he was actually living in Speedway. He was arrested again in 1979 for the rape of a Hamilton County woman and was sentenced to 95 years in prison. And while in prison, he allegedly confessed to the murders, which is why another inmate contacted a reporter from the Indianapolis Star in December of 1984. So this reporter looks into Forrester, and he finds out that Forrester's ex-wife, who he was married to back in 1978 when the Burger Chef murders occurred, had actually contacted police in 1979. In this report, she said that she had accompanied her then husband to a place near the murder site in Johnson County a few weeks after the murders. She claimed that Forrester had been looking for shell casings along a road near Stones Crossing Road, and after finding 6, he took them home, flushed them down the toilet, and made a phone call, and this will become important in just a minute. So this reporter goes to interview Forrester in prison, and during this interview, Forrester claims that the murders occurred because of drugs. And this is really interesting because police had already theorized that this wasn't just a robbery gone wrong, that the murders did have to do with drugs, because in 1981, Jane's brother James was actually arrested on cocaine charges, so that led them to believe that that may have been the reason that these 4 employees were murdered. They believed that maybe James owed some bad people some money, and so they went to the Burger Chef to hurt his sister to teach James a lesson, and the other 3 people were just killed because they were witnesses. So the police were contacted, and, despite all of the evidence against Forrester, he was definitely sketchy. Like, his motivations behind talking to people was definitely sketchy. He was 34 years old by this time, and he was about to be transferred to Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, which was not going to be ideal for a sex offender. And when talking to the reporter, he basically said that he would help him out and give him some information if he could help him get a new trial so that he didn't have to go to Indiana State. So when police were contacted, they were definitely wary that he might not be telling the truth, that he might just be saying what they wanted to hear in order to get what he wanted. But they brought him to Marion County for an interview, and it was there that he admitted that he executed Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton with the .38 caliber gun. Detectives then drove him to the field where the bodies were found, and he was able to pinpoint exactly where each body had been found. And he also told police about the broken knife that was lodged in Jane's sternum, and that information actually hadn't been released to the public by this point. He claimed that he and 3 other accomplices were part of a drug dealing gang. Is that a thing? I feel like that sounds like something an undercover cop would say. Is that what they're called? Hey guys, I heard you were part of a drug dealing gang. Can I get some coke? Anyway, apparently Jane's brother James owed them some money, so on the night of the 17th of November, they went to the Burger Chef to kind of intimidate Jane to try and pressure James to pay. While they were there, Mark Flemons tried to defend Jane and he was knocked unconscious, and the drug dealing gang believed that he was dead. They then abducted all 3 of the employees and took Mark's body with them so that there would be no witnesses to the murder. They put them all into Jane's car, drove that to the middle of town where it was abandoned and found. They then transferred them all into a getaway car, drove them to the woods in Johnson County where they murdered them. And this could also explain why Mark Flemons asphyxiated on his own blood, because they thought he was dead, so they just left him there. He also told them that after Jane's car was discovered, he and his wife at the time went back to Johnson County to look for all of the shell casings, and after he found them, he took them back home and flushed them down the toilet, which obviously goes hand in hand with what his ex-wife tried to tell police back in 1979. So after this information, police went back to his old house that he lived in Speedway at the time, and they searched through the septic tank, and they found multiple .38 caliber shell casings, which definitely backed up the whole story. They also got Forrester to call one of his accomplices that he had named, and they got him to record the whole thing, but unfortunately for some reason the recording didn't quite work. The quality was really bad, so they actually couldn't use it. They were, however, able to salvage an exchange where Forrester basically told his accomplice that he was going to talk to the police about the Burger Chef murders unless his accomplice gave him some money to pay for an attorney. And apparently the way that his accomplice responded, it was like obvious that he was guilty. It was really sketchy, so police believed that they had solved the case. And police also found that this accomplice that Forrester had called, his house had actually been linked to drug trafficking in Speedway, and that Jane had actually been to that house on multiple occasions. So everything was just kind of linking up. Anyway, this next part is really going to annoy a lot of you because I know it really annoyed me too. Basically, somebody leaked to the media that Forrester was working as an informant for police, and Forrester freaked out, stopped cooperating with police completely, he recanted his confession, and he never spoke of the murders again. And police didn't have enough evidence by this point to arrest anyone. Forrester died in prison of cancer in 2006, and that was that. That is the last development in the case. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that Forrester and his little drug dealing buddies were responsible for the murders, but unfortunately I don't think this case is ever going to be solved. And it's just so frustrating that they were so close to solving the case, but they just didn't quite have enough evidence, and then someone leaked that and Forrester closed up, and that was it. That was the end of it. In 2018, Ruth Shelton's sister, Teresa Jeffries, made a public appeal for anyone with any information to come forward. She said, "We don't have all the answers, and there's someone out there that does. I hope that before my time on Earth is gone, that I have those answers." Following this, First Sergeant Bill Dalton came out and announced that they were going to be using new technology to try and test DNA in the case, but as far as I know, nothing has come of that. It was at this time that Dalton also released some more information about the case. He released the photo of the hunting knife that was stuck in Jane's chest, and that had never been released before. But that is all of the information that I have on this case. It is so incredibly frustrating that it felt like it was just so close to being solved. And then some idiot goes and leaks that he's an informant and the whole thing just comes crumbling down. I feel like it's pretty obvious that he was the guy, and I feel like if they got that close and it didn't happen, then I feel like it's never gonna happen. Unless one of the other 3 people involved comes forward, which I highly, highly doubt. I just feel like this case is going to go unsolved, which is so incredibly heartbreaking and frustrating, and I can't even imagine how the families feel about that. As always, I would love to discuss your thoughts about the case in the comments down below, and I would love to hear future case suggestions in the comments as well if you have any. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!